Sox on 35th is next. Doors open on the left.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Coughlin, and welcome to the Sox on 35th podcast. We are back with another exciting episode covering your Chicago White Sox. As always, I am joined by our panelists, Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Doing all right. I was in Las Vegas this week for a work trip, so I wasn't able to catch all the games, which maybe is a good thing considering how the team played. Also gives me a bit of a window here to rant about something that I've noticed, which is that this team is sack bunting a lot for a manager who said he doesn't like to give away outs. And I understand there are rare cases where actually it makes sense. It increases the win probability. I get that. But that's not really what's happening. First, you have Oscar Colas in Pittsburgh. Again, might have been himself doing it without being told by a manager, but still, I didn't like that because you had Romy Gonzalez and Sepi Zavala after him, and they're both worse hitters than Oscar. Then you have Benintendi trying to do it the other night against Baltimore, I believe, and then he ends up getting an RBI hit anyway after he fails to lay the bunt down. So that was actually kind of funny that it didn't work out. And then you had whatever the hell Lenyn Sosa was doing on a 2-1 count the other day. That wasn't a sack bunt, but it's still, I don't even want to talk about it. And again, you could say, oh, just the players doing it on their own, and maybe Grifol doesn't like it. But it's his job to then tell them, hey, I don't want you randomly bunting in hitters counts or sack bunting when there are worse hitters behind you. Like, I don't buy that argument for more than just one player, for one instance. So I'm a little disappointed in that, honestly. I was hoping to not see that out of him. I don't think he's the most analytical manager ever, but I also didn't think he would be at, like, La Russa levels of bunting frequency. So that's what I'm annoyed about. I know it's ultimately a small issue for a team that's not winning anyway, but it's a bad sign in my opinion.
I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. I mean, I'll agree on all the sack bunting. I'm a huge non-proponent of bunting in general. It's fun when the Orioles bunt over and they play for a run in the game on Saturday, and then they lose to the team who didn't just play for a run. So it's like, no bunts, all for it. Bunting, not really for it, but Nik, good job with that. I'm doing fine, though. Thanks for asking, everyone.
The sentiment when I was at the game that really got the section I was in going was, could you imagine if this team had been bunting this much when Tony La Russa was still manager? Twitter headquarters would have had to shut down because their servers would have started on fire. Like, it's insane with how much I've been seeing the bunting. I got to see Lenyn Sosa bunt in person. It was awful. But anyway, great to hear that you guys are doing good. Nik, you speak for the entire fan base on the bunting point. I'm so glad you brought that up. We will be joined by Sean W. Anderson from CHGO White Sox here in a few minutes. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the website at SoxOn35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SoxOn35th. Now, without further ado, our great conversation interview with Sean W. Anderson. Okay, we are now joined by the host of CHGO White Sox podcast, Sean W. Anderson. You can follow him on Twitter at Sean_W_Anderson. Sean, it's great to have you on the show. Big fan of the content you put both on Twitter and on the airwaves. I've always really liked the content you bring out. I think I speak for everybody on the pod when I say that. Just to kind of start a little bit more casual, what made you a White Sox fan? What kind of got you started in following the wonderful team on 35th and Shields?
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on the new revamped Sox on 35th pod, so congrats. We needed another White Sox podcast. There's now 26. We're at a great number. Who's your favorite 26 White Sox? Nicky Delmonico? Anyways. Avi Garcia?
Avi Garcia all the way, baby.
He's an all-star. But yeah, no, very excited to be on here. And I was a Cubs fan first. My birth date is the 21st, and my favorite color was blue. So when Sammy Sosa's hitting 60 home runs in your city, it's tough not to love that guy. But in 2004, corked his bat, Cubs stunk. It already broke my heart in 2003. So I was like, you know what? I'll go to the winning side because my dad was a Sox fan. I'm a Southsider. So yeah, I left Cubs fandom in 2004, right before 2005, and after they win the World Series that year, it's tough to change after that. So yeah, I was a Cubs fan first. It's something that I've had to come to terms with. I just have to, if I'm not honest with myself and everybody else, then I'm a liar.
No, hey, at least you're straight up about it. I feel like a lot of people bounce back and forth, and they don't really tell anybody about it until a team is really good on one side of the city or the other. Because it feels like we're never good at the same time. So like everyone just wants to constantly watch good baseball, so they can't go through the the tough patches, the post Chris Sale trade patches. You know what I mean? So it's nice that you're honest about that. I appreciate that. I'm glad you've stuck it out with us, even though it could be a little difficult at times.
Well, and to your point too, Duke, like in 2020, I mean, we saw all the people predicting Cubs Sox World Series because the two teams were good at the same time. So when they are good at the same time, people get delusional, and it's scary.
But at the same time, you did also state once the Cubs won in 2016. So that's good credit to your part.
Yeah, I really wasn't even tempted. There was a part of me that was rooting for them in 2016 just because, the Sox weren't in it. I didn't really have a team that I was rooting for. But then when Rajah Davis hit that home run, I was like, oh, this would be funny. It would be really funny if they lost. So I didn't mean it in any hateful way, but I would have been fine if Cleveland won it in 2016, especially in Game 7 after Rajah Davis hit that homer because, I started going crazy for that one because that's just great baseball.
Right.
Yeah, no, and you started getting a little bit of a taste where it's like, man, Cleveland can really pull this off, And I just when you're around as many Cubs fans as you can be in that time, sure you have your friends that are like, all right, this guy's a diehard Cubs fan, would love to see Cubs win for them, but then you have the guys that are like just the worst people on the planet about it, need to tell everybody how great the Cubs are at all times and how terrible that your baseball team is. So. Yeah, but kind of moving forward, that's great stuff. I'm glad you can admit that you were a Cubs fan first, and I'm glad you came to the right side of the city. How did your career bring you to CHGO? How did you become the man with Herb Lawrence over on the White Sox side of things?
The reason I'm at CHGO is Herb Lawrence, and I know he doesn't like when I say that, but it's true. Thankfully, Herb Lawrence spoke up for me. When I had Jordan on Locked On White Sox, I had that job because Chris Tannehill and Herb Lawrence spoke up for me. So I put myself in the situation of, wanting to be in radio, getting into a different radio cluster and working promotions, and then, going to Odyssey, the Scores cluster, and working promotions there, working myself up to a producer, and then I just got lucky where, I worked hard, and Herb and Tanny were like, hey, let's give him a shot. So people speaking up for me, honestly. I feel like I worked hard, but if Herb Lawrence didn't speak up for me when they were starting CHGO, I don't think I'd be with him and Vinny. I think just putting myself in a spot to know somebody who would speak up for me and somebody who climbed and pulled up, I'm lucky to know Herb Lawrence. So, in the question, you kind of answered it.
You've come a long way from the days where the Locked On White Sox days where I believe you were in your closet when we did that interview. So you've come a long way. It looks like you got a bit of an upgrade over there at CHGO.
Yeah, now I have a Roadcaster. I didn't have to pay for it. It's real nice. There's an office space here, and even at my new apartment, I have an actual office too. So no more closet for me. I've upgraded, Jordan. So yeah, humble beginnings.
But it's very cool to see kind of how you've kind of, like you said, risen up that ladder, had those people who are like, hey, good dude, hard worker, knows his White Sox baseball, and kind of get you to that point. So it's very cool to see kind of that progression from someone who was there when you were in your closet. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys always supporting me every step of the way. It's great. And hey, when everyone asks me like what I do, I still can't believe that I just be like, I watch White Sox games and then I talk about the White Sox. Like, I have to pinch myself every day because it's the coolest damn job in the world.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think Jordan, you really said it all. Like, it's always great seeing a guy just put in the work, put in all the hours and just kind of really make that meteoric rise to where they are today. And you earned it. All the hard work pays off. All it takes is that one person to finally give you the chance, and I think you've more than proved that you were the guy for the job. So it's great to have you on, and it's always great to hear a lot of your content. So just kind of looking at it from the outside, looking in, just over like a broad scope. What is your pulse on the White Sox the first few weeks of the season? Like, do we have what are the early struggles? Is there anything that's worrying you? Is there anything that kind of has you feeling positive? What is your feel on the 2023 Chicago White Sox currently?
I feel like every single pitch, every single game result, my attitude changes. I have no clue what to think about the 2023 White Sox. They're saying prove it, and clearly their record being 6-9, nice. But just it's difficult to have any faith that, they're going to be above 500. They weren't last year, and all the projections said that they weren't going to be in 2023. Yet I am out here predicting 83 wins. It's above 500, but again, I don't know how they're going to get there. And I think, honestly, a lot of it has to depend on this Sunday result. They haven't won a series yet. Are they going to win a series? There's another chance against a rookie pitcher, and your ace is on the mound to end a series. Maybe Mother Nature doesn't allow them to play, but if they have the Orioles coming into their park and they lose again with their ace on the bump, I'm going to be in the dumps. I mean, come on, Being Bitter will be back tomorrow. I mean, like it would be really sad for them not to, in the first 4 series, win one. And they've been in all of them. And it's just kind of showing me that they can't close. And if you can't close, then when are you going to win a series? When are you ever going to be above 500? So, again, it's April. There's been about 15 games. Going to be 16 after today. It's tough to say that they're dead, they're done. The AL Central's bad. I don't think the Cleveland Guardians are that good. We see that the Minnesota Twins are banged up, and yet, they're now 2-1 against us. So you had the chance to truly sweep the Minnesota Twins, and you couldn't even put the nail in that coffin. So yeah, I'm still excited about this team. I'm not giving up on this team, but there's so many turns where it's just like nothing's actually changed. Nothing's changed from 2022, and that sucks.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sean there. I think that it's too early to make any, bold predictions or proclamations about what this team is or isn't. But that being said, the idea that things still feel the same is just so pervasive. For me, it's the offense, really just looking at the trends. As of yesterday, they were still second in the league in ground ball rate. They're not pulling the ball in the air enough. It's the same thing we've been harping on for what feels like 2 or 3 years now. And we thought that changing out the coaching staff would help. And maybe, it's too early to say that it hasn't. Of course, it's been, 15 games. But at the same time, it's just like you're watching the same team over and over again, with the exception of, having a different face in the dugout and Andrew Benintendi. Otherwise, everything's pretty much the exact same in terms of the offense. And they deserve more time. I think one thing that I think it was Jordan who said in an earlier episode that it was nice to see them hitting a lot of doubles because that at least is a step up from just being singles only. At the same time, it would be nice to see the ball go over the fence more, especially from anybody other than Jake Berger, which is not a knock on him, just to say that it would be nice to see other people step it up. I guess Luis Robert Jr. too. So yeah, I'm kind of in a wait and see approach, but would really love to see the offense maybe have a little bit more patience, maybe stop hitting the ball on the ground very soon, because it's very frustrating to watch the same thing over and over.
And I think at the same time, there are some positive trends to some of what we've seen with the offense. I think an increase in doubles has been a big part of it, and that's, again, baby steps is kind of what I'm preaching by saying that. Another thing I look at, everyone's pointing out the walk rate, still low, still an issue. Ground ball rate, still high, still an issue. Looking at individual players, just in terms of approaches, I feel like has been a bit better in terms of some of the guys. Luis Robert, chase rate from 41% last year to 38% this year. Basically the same, a little bit lower, but at least it's not worse. Both Andrew Vaughn and Tim Anderson have seen their chase rates drop drastically from last year. Grandal's has gone up. However, he's also swinging the most he ever has in his career. That's been a good thing so far as he's knocking on the door of 300. Jimenez and Moncada have seen their chase rates rise a bit. Moncada's hasn't really changed. Jimenez, maybe just in-season adjustments, he hasn't been healthy. So maybe that's just a part of getting into that adjustment period. I think the general consensus here is going to be, it's too early. There's some negatives, there's some positives. When it comes to looking at both the offensive profile, the bullpen, starting pitching, it's 15 games. The highs are going to be super high. The lows are going to be super low. I think, Sean, you said it perfectly. It changes every pitch, every inning, every game, every day. It's changing so rapidly that it's like, let's just get through the next 2 weeks. Let's get through the next 3 weeks. Let's figure out what this team is once things start to stabilize.
Well, and can I give you guys an example? Just yesterday, the Saturday game, Jake Berger ties Jorge Mateo in 2023 home runs. They both have 3. Jake Berger is now second in the team in home runs. He didn't make the opening day roster. So, again, I don't know how to stomach that to the point where my guy, Andrew Vaughn, who I'm trying to say he's ready to take over Jose Abreu, his OPS is currently 830, which is matching Jose Abreu's past 3 years outside of 2020. So he's filling the role fine. He's a little bit below average at defense, but also it's April. Maybe he'll get a little bit more comfortable in the position. And like Jordan said, his walk rate's nearly 15%. I mean, Andrew Vaughn has been fine. But here I am questioning where they could play Jake Berger because every time he swings and makes contact, it's 115 miles per hour off the bat. You need a bat like that in the lineup. But he can't play third base, but you kind of need him to because Hanser Alberto now just went to the IL, and Yohan Moncada's back is on the IL. So who's your third baseman? It's Jake Berger, who Vinny, right before he played third base in 2023, is telling me he'll never play third base again. So that's pretty drastic right there. Does he play first base, right? You know, that makes the most position. That's where he's been this whole spring training, but are you really going to bench Andrew Vaughn? But, like, you can't play Vaughn anywhere else. We saw that. He can't play the outfield. You really need the DH spot for Eloy Jimenez because he can't stay healthy. Like, this team's just a mess. And Andrew Benintendi, like, you spent $75 million on that man? Like, that was your offseason? Like, you go out, like Nick said, it's like all that's changed is Benintendi. And, like, he's not walking. And to your point, they're not pulling fly balls. My guy, Andrew Vaughn, has not hit a home run yet. You look at his spray chart, there's no pulled fly balls. It's the best pulled fly ball was the Pablo Lopez double that was truly just a flare that was to the warning track. Like, he just got it over the left fielder. Like, and even Benintendi, he's the same guy that we saw. It's a lot of opposite field fly balls. I really don't love the makeup of this team. They need to walk more, and they need to start hitting for power. And I don't understand how the Orioles, with their players that are, you know, not these top prospects like Andrew Vaughn, Eloy Jimenez, whatever. And, you know, they got Jorge Mateo, whose career high before this was 13. He's got 3 already. Like, you talked about ball and error at the trade deadline, and have you done that, Rick Hahn? Like, what have you actually done to make those changes? I don't understand how this team is not selling out for power and doing it somewhat successfully. They keep failing.
I think the biggest thing is the Jake Berger point for me. It's like 3 home runs, that's great. How did you not put him on this opening day roster? I think that was a conversation we all sort of had. I think how many episodes ago was we're like putting it out. It's like, I have a hard time leaving him off. I have a hard time looking at this team and saying it's better off without it. My, call it hot take, meatball take, whatever it's going to end up being once it inevitably gets clipped up and put on Twitter and I get destroyed for it. See what Moncada can do back at second base. If you really think you need to get Berger in the lineup that badly, see if he can handle himself over there. Small sample size. He was terrible defensively there in 2018. Small sample size in 2017. He graded out fine there. I don't like the idea of doing it necessarily, but at a certain point, if the only guy who's selling out for that power, Sean, as you're saying, is the one you can't fit in the lineup, you almost have to fit a square peg into a round hole at some point. You know, you almost have to say, is the offensive upside worth the defensive truly downgrade it's going to be to move Jake Berger into a fielding position other than first base? Again, hot take, meatball, whatever it's going to end up being, it's something that almost has to be seriously considered. Again, you don't want to overreact to 15 games, but when the only guy right now hitting home runs is the guy who you couldn't even make the opening day roster because he didn't have a position, the common saying is, you know, hit the baseball, they'll find a position for you. And it almost feels like that's what the Sox have to do here, if this is something we still see 2-3 weeks from now, obviously.
Well, I think the way you have to look at it, you guys touched on a lot of my favorite points with the White Sox because I was very much a big Jake Burger guy. Even last year, really trying to push him to stay on the major league roster in any way that you can. I understand the idea that it's very hard to try to keep him on the field, especially when you have a Yoan Moncada at third base. And you know, I always kind of memed about the idea of playing Jake Burger at second base, but obviously that's not realistic.
Well,
but, you know,
Duke, can I follow up with a meatball take here?
Go ahead.
Jordan brings up Yoan Moncada moving back to second base. I think that's a bad idea because we see Yoan foul a ball off his leg, and then he gets completely disinterested in the game. You put him at second base, he's going to be disinterested. He doesn't want to play second base. He's a great fielder at third base. Don't fix what's broken. He barely, we barely get the production we want out of Yoan Moncada. So I don't think moving him to second base is the right thing. The real meatball take here is that what the White Sox should have done, instead of putting Andrew Vaughn in right or left field, is made him a second baseman. Tony La Russa wanted it. He's a better athlete than Jake Burger. I'm just saying, we've seen Mike Moustakas do it. I think if we saw Andrew Vaughn lumber out in left field and right field, I would have seen at least a season of Vaughn at second base. So Jake Burger's just not quick enough. He's such a bad fielder. I mean, like, I would hate to give up Moncada, who plays nearly elite or at least top 75 percentile defense at third. I'd hate to give that up for Jake Burger, who's going to make an error at
and that's
2 errors in the series.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like the question of is the offensive upside worth the defensive downgrade? Probably not. Actually, at the end of the day, that's kind of how you see that question kind of answering itself. We've seen the issues as they've operated. Andrew Vaughn at second base is something I feel like we saw it in a spring training game or something. Like they at least tossed it around.
He started there in Kansas City a couple of years ago, and I don't remember anything crazy happening. Yeah,
a doubleheader.
Yeah, doubleheader. Yeah, it was like a weird La Russa lineup game, but that was it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty par for the course for a Tony La Russa lineup anyway. But I guess to my point that I've been dying to make here for a minute, because you guys have brought up a lot of the points I make up with Jake Burger as far as offensive upside against defensive downside. I'll wager you this. This is the name that always comes to my head when we have this discussion. He's a guy who is not a baseball Hall of Famer, but should be a baseball Hall of Famer. He was a horrendous fielder, but he played a lot of second base, third base, and first base. His name was Jeff Kent. He was a guy who could flat out hit baseballs, and he could hit so well that teams would accept how bad he was on the defensive side of things because he produced that much on offense. Now, I'm not saying Jake Burger is Jeff Kent, but I'm saying there is a legitimate argument that can be made that the offensive upside is good enough for the defensive downside. And while I do agree that I don't want him starting every day in the field, do I want to see him mess around at DH a little bit more? Yes. And do I think he'd be a more than competent first baseman if Andrew Vaughn were to play second? 100%. I actually really like that idea. I do also think that, while Yoan's, feelings should be taken into consideration to a point, Yoan would profile so well with what his normal numbers are as a second baseman. Anyway, he'd be one of the best power hitting second basemen in the league compared to where he's kind of a mid-tier power hitter at third base right now. And I know that doesn't necessarily totally matter in a sense, but I really think Yoan could even try to earn himself a little bit more money on that second contract, hitting what he does now at second base if he were to take that kind of role. Do I want to give up a potential Gold Glover at the hot corner? That's a hard discussion to have. But when Jake Burger has not only done it in these 15 games, but has also had a pretty strong stretch last year where he was hitting for power, he at a certain point was carrying our offense, at a time where our offense was completely dead. People were trying to do the Yermin Mercedes comparison to him, but I really think he profiles so much better as a natural hitter, and I think that's why he was a first-round pick in the first place. So I do think I agree. There is downside to it, but at a certain point when a guy's hitting, you have to find a way to keep him in the lineup every day. And while some people might kind of start coming to the idea that does Eloy need to be in the lineup every day? That's something we need to see play out as well. I think Eloy is too good of a hitter not to be, but regardless, Jake Burger, we need to score runs, especially if our bullpen's going to play the way it is. And I think that's really the direction we need to go. We need to find a way to get Jake Burger into the lineup. And I genuinely agree with you guys. I can't believe he was not an opening day guy.
Well, right now with Hanser and Moncada on the IL, we don't have to worry about Burger not getting playing time. He will. Burger will be getting playing time, so at least for the next 10 days or so, whatever, he'll be fine and he'll be getting playing time. 2, if he keeps hitting, he'll probably just knock Hanser Alberto off the team. I mean, do we need Hanser Alberto on this team? I mean, they're both below average defenders. I mean, Jake Berger's a better baseball player. He just might make the roster that. The Kent thing is interesting, but like it doesn't even matter if he plays defense. Like 30 teams have DHs. Like you don't have you can't really make him the Sox DH because you're paying the Sox DH $43 million. You can't make him the third baseman because you're paying the third baseman $75 million, right? Like the White Sox have their money made. Like that's why Yasmani Grandal isn't going to be going off this team anytime soon. Hey, he's blocking pretty well so far. If you're looking at Statcast,
top blocker as of Sunday. I was gonna tweet it, but I'm waiting a little bit before I open my mouth and
Chuck
then
beat you to it.
Stick my foot in it later. But
Chuck beat you to it. Chuck's
did
already
he?
got the Statcast leaderboard. I saw it from Chuck first.
Dang it.
But that's the thing is like will Jake Berger have value in the trade market? Like I don't need Jake Berger on this team. Like we have a lot of power hitting righties. Like get me a power hitting lefty. Like Gavin Sheets. Ugh. Like Gavin Sheets' walk rate is great. Oh my God, it's the best on the team. Can he hit a double? Can he hit the ball hard? Everything is just. I mean, he's like Andrew Benintendi, but 6'4", and he can't play defense. Like Gavin Sheets is the one that really bugs me because he might be a bad baseball player. Jake Berger can hit. Jake Berger could be a bench bat. I mean, hey, make him Matt Stairs. I mean, I don't know what he is. Maybe he doesn't have a ton of trade value, but I mean, he might be a guy that come 31, he just gets a ton of playing time, and it's like Dan Vogelbach. I mean, like his power is insane. I just don't know if he's going to be a White Sox. I don't know if he needs to be on the Sox.
Yeah, and I feel like that's been a discussion that's been had really over the past 2 years, essentially since Jake's gotten healthy and has shown flashes of being that batter that he was drafted to be. Is he somebody that was floated in trade discussions this past offseason? It's hard to know because Rick Hahn usually holds that stuff pretty close to the chest. I kind of had him predicted as being one of the pieces of a potential Sean Murphy trade before the season. Obviously, that never came to fruition, but and you also have to wonder, was the rumor about the Phillies and Gavin Sheets legitimate, and why didn't we try to pull the trigger on that? What is Rick Hahn's beholdenness to a guy like Gavin Sheets? I understand the idea of having ideal matchups as far as lefties and righties bats, but you can't hold on to Gavin Sheets because he hits the occasional bomb when he really just isn't doing a lot more else with the bat. You know what I mean?
Well, and the Sheets thing is interesting too, just with the Phillies, just because we see Kevin Long taking all these lefties like Kyle Schwarber, Brandon Marsh, Jake Cave, and trying to turn him into sluggers. So if Kevin Long might be seeing something in Gavin Sheets, that just tells me again, like, hey, I wanted Kevin Long on as the White Sox hitting coach. But like again, like what is Pedro Grifol, Mike Tozar, and Chris Johnson doing? Like, I love Chris Johnson's energy and how he was like, oh, we're gonna hit the fastball, we're gonna tee in on the fastball and try to be a fastball hitting team, and we just haven't really seen that attitude or that power or that dominance come through. The White Sox really haven't asserted themselves offensively, and not questioning the hitting coach yet, but again, like it's just I'd like to see some results or some of that talk kind of bear fruit here, or maybe hear more from Chris Johnson, because we haven't heard from him, even during spring training or during the regular season. So it'd be nice to hear some from the hitting coaches.
So I was pretty strong on the Chris Johnson bandwagon last year about potentially bringing him up, and if I have to jump right back on that bandwagon, I have absolutely zero issue doing that. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. I really like Chris Johnson, but I'm hoping that this team can get a little bit more consistent with the bats. I mean, we're hitting the baseball. That's not the issue. It's just more consistency. We need to be able to score runs in tight games. We shouldn't be losing to the Pittsburgh Pirates in a gem by Kopech because we couldn't score a run. You know what I mean? So. But I think that kind of flies us to the other side of the spectrum here, because we've been talking about offense quite a bit. We need to talk about the current White Sox bullpen and the management that's been going on about it. Sean, just first thoughts with what the White Sox bullpen looks like right now, whether it be how we're feeling about the arms that are coming out, when they're coming out, the decisions we're making to take people out. Putting Kenyon Middleton in a tie game yesterday and then bringing in Aaron Bummer with bases loaded is just such a wild sequence of events, in my opinion. How are you feeling about the White Sox bullpen currently?
I didn't hate the Keenan Middleton thing. I got to be honest. The way he looked in Minnesota, he looked disgusting. I don't know. I mean, like right now, I just am questioning and like everyone did when they made all the signings, but what, 38% of the salaries being spent on the bullpen, and all I've seen this year is just why did Joe Kelly get $9 million and why did Kendall Graveman get $8 million? I mean, this team would have been helped with lefty power. You could have spent $17 million, or hey, even sprinkled the $3 more million and gotten to Kyle Schwarber. Like, you know, we have Jake Berger who can't play defense. It'd be nice if that guy was lefty and hit 40 home runs. Like, I just think that you see guys like Keenan Middleton, and yeah, maybe he doesn't deliver against the Orioles, but he's cheap, and you could find guys like Keenan Middleton all around the MLB that are just being casted off. And if Ethan Katz is this good, where we see Jimmy Lambert, Davis Martin, Reynaldo Lopez, Keenan Middleton take those jumps, you're just wasting premium money on bad talent. I mean, we talked about this when Taze announced his retirement or whatever, like last game with the Hawks. You know, when you're building out hockey lines for this White Sox team, it's Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, our first liners. Then, you know, Yohan Moncada, Dylan Cease, someone else probably, you know, in that first line. Like, they went out and spent money on second liner Andrew Benintendi. They went out and spent probably, you know, premium money on a third liner and Liam Hendricks. Like, he's a closer. And Yasmani Grandal, like, again, like, catcher isn't a hugely valuable position in baseball. Like, I wish they went out and got a great player at a great position. And I feel like, you know, they tried to take those in-house shots. Manny Machado making $300 million. Like, what, they were $25 million away from that? Like, you know, this team, I don't know how differently they would look with Manny Machado, but I'd like to see it. Again, it's just, I think this bullpen shows what I've seen through the first 15 games. Is just saying that, you know, this is why I have worries about this team being a World Series champion, because I just think they've misspent their money. Because Ethan Katz seems to be all right at taking some of these forgotten about names and giving them a little bit new life. So I would have let Katz cook, honestly.
Yeah, from a resource allocation standpoint, I totally agree. I think that, kind of like what Sean was saying, it's definitely telling that some of the relievers that we trust most right now, and I know trust is relative because pretty much everyone's been bad out of the bullpen, relatively speaking. But, like, you know, Reynaldo Lopez, Jimmy Lambert, Aaron Bummer, these are all guys who are, relatively speaking, cheap because they're not Joe Kelly, Graveman level free agents. You didn't have to pay them anything other than arbitration and pre-arb. So that's kind of, I guess, the overall point is it's not always who are you paying, but it's who are you finding. I think the Gregory Santos and Franklin Herman trades are examples of people who might develop into, like, you know, a Lopez or Lambert type, like a dependable mid to late inning guy that you should be taking chances on. And in terms of the current bullpen, I just think, I mean, first of all, we have to acknowledge, you know, no Hendricks, no Crochet is always going to make the bullpen look a lot worse, especially when you have to turn to Jake Diekman so often. Maybe you don't have to turn to him as often as they have been, but nonetheless, he's there. You have to use him, and he just doesn't throw enough strikes. At the same time, that's kind of the problem with me for the whole bullpen right now is you rarely see pitchers who where you feel like they're confident on the mound, confident attacking hitters. Everything's they're nibbling and they're just not throwing enough strikes. And I can't help but mention they do have the highest BABIP against out of any bullpen right now. I believe it was like 400 entering yesterday, so that's going to regress. But at the same time, you also can't be walking as many batters as they have because, as we all know, that's just a perfect recipe to lose games. And it's annoying because it's coming from guys who have a track record of not walking. Like Lopez last year barely walked anybody. Now he's walking people. Diekman's always been a high walk guy, so you can't be too surprised by that. But you just have to hope for some positive regression there. I'm not really sure what we can do right now other than just wait for Crochet and Hendricks to come back.
Yeah, well, and even to add on to Santos and all the guys they found in Herman, even Nick Avila in the Rule 5 draft. Like, if Kelly or Graveman weren't on this team, does Avila make it? Like, I mean, that just felt like, or they're not forced to spend the money on Diekman, does Nick Avila make it? Like, I mean, they could have found another gem right there, 24-year-olds, because Katz knew him from the Giants organization for cheap. And, you know, they had to let him walk. But, I mean, that could have been another arm that they could have found and developed. So, yeah, I mean, it's just that's my whole issue.
And I do think some of what Nick just mentioned is exactly why I'm hesitant to say, like, the bullpen's a problem. Like, paying how much you paid the bullpen, don't get me wrong, that's still the problem. Bullpen BABIP entering Sunday, 395. That's 45 points higher than the next highest in Philadelphia, 50 points higher than third, who's the Dodgers. And the Dodgers are a team that usually they'll put together a decent bullpen at the very least, especially when they're trying to compete most seasons. By season, again, why do people care about BABIP? 395 so far this year. Last 2 seasons for the Sox bullpen, relatively the same pieces these past 2 years, 298 and 301. You assume it's going to figure itself out, see some positive regression in that sense. Maybe it's not going to be all the way down to 300 because the shift has to have some sort of impact on the game. But 395 is astronomical. That's part of the reason. You also mentioned the walk rates, Nick. Just almost every single one of the main 7 guys in this bullpen, not counting Kelly because he's hurt, they all have walk rates right now well above their career norms. Diekman's at 25%. Even though he walks a lot of people, his career walk rate's only 13%. Like, that's super high right now. Graveman, 8% walk rate. Right now is 19%. Like, that is a huge difference from his career. And you can go down the list, and most of these guys are either at their career standards or greatly exceeding those walk rates. You have to almost assume that that's what statistics are for, the career trends. You assume there's going to be some sort of positive regression there as well. Again, do I think there's issues there that need to still be fixed? Absolutely. Do I think it's just because career norms say they're going to do this that they're going to do it? Not necessarily. It changes every season. But at the same time, there's at least enough hope there, kind of like what I mentioned with chase rates for hitters. There's enough hope there that you can say, 15 games may not be enough for me to stand up here and say this is exactly what they are. At the very least, you're looking for hope these first 15 games or so. There's at least that sort of hope there.
So, looking completely outside the numbers for me, because I thought you guys all just did an incredible job kind of breaking down, career norms and whatnot, especially the walk rate, because I think that's something that's very important. And, obviously, guys struggle early on in the season, but they usually get into a role, especially guys like Kendall. I think Kendall will eventually get ramped up to where he normally is. I really think that not having Liam Hendriks and having that set closer piece at the end of the end of the bullpen really is hurting this team. And I think Reynaldo is our quote unquote closer right now, but it really hurts not being able to have a lot of these guys in the bullpen and really 100% locked in set roles right now. And I think at least how I feel when I'm watching a White Sox game is it feels like we have such a hodgepodge of guys coming into the games. Like, it doesn't feel like there's any situation right now where, say, we're in a 2-1 ball game and we have the lead. I don't know who's coming out of that bullpen right then. You know what I mean?
I don't know about that. I feel like what we've always talked about is that Pedro has a winning bullpen and he has a losing bullpen. So even if they're down a run, that's when you'll see Jake Diekman, or you'll see Jimmy Lambert, right? Or you'll see Gregory Santos. When they win, I go to the 4-3 win that they had in Minnesota. I think they went Lambert, Bummer, Graveman, Lopez, or so that order. I feel like he has his guys when they have a winning bullpen, and when they lose, they're not going to use any of their guys. But then it hurts them even when in Pittsburgh they're winning 11-5. They're using their best guys still. So then when it's a 1-0 game, the next day Graveman can't go. So that's the weird thing, is that if they win, it's all of the good guys, and it doesn't matter the differential or anything. He's going to put out his best bullpen guys if they have the lead, which is just that's baffled me. It just really does feel like win. All right, here are all our guys. Losing, here are all our guys.
Well, and even kind of build off of that, you brought up Jimmy Lambert, and you brought them both up on the losing and winning side of things. I think Jimmy Lambert is turning into a high-leverage guy that we can trust, genuinely. I think he kind of proved a lot of that last year as well. I don't think I really need to see him in a losing effort, unless it's like a one-run ball game, and even then that's still a situation where Jimmy could still be used better on the back end of a winning game. And I really think bringing in Liam and being able to use Reynaldo as a 7th or 8th inning guy is going to help us a lot, as well as getting a guy like Joe Kelly healthy and back, because I thought Joe, while he did have some struggles early on this year, I thought he looked significantly better than what he looked at last year, especially when it came to control. I think getting guys in more kind of set roles, because it still feels like we're in a feeling out process, will help us a lot. And I think, even having the difference with a Jose Ruiz starting the year on the roster and getting the axe as quick as he did, that kind of throws things off in the bullpen, because that was kind of your innings eater type guy who you have in losing efforts. So who is that guy now? You know what I mean? Is that a Jake Diekman specifically? Is that a guy you want to use that's one of your few lefties in the pen in that situation? You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot that goes into it. I don't want to necessarily sit here and say that it's a completely random process, but I do think having a guy like Liam Hendriks will be able to lock guys into roles a little bit easier. Even Garrett Crochet coming back will really help the bullpen as well to kind of get dignified roles to guys that we want in certain situations.
Well, and hopefully too, Garrett Crochet is better than Jake Diekman, so just the bullpen will get better, addition by subtraction. But the question I have is just how have you guys felt about Raylo? Herb and I kind of had this discussion, and I feel like Herb is being a pretty tough grader on Reynaldo Lopez. He's, I think, the one guy with a role, but we kind of saw that role adjust on the 14th where he gets brought in to kind of bail Diekman out. But thumbs up, thumbs down? I mean, how do you feel about closer Raylo?
I have been a proponent of closer Raylo, or at least the idea of high leverage Raylo. I was never his biggest fan. I think there's plenty of tweets where I've said as much. But I think once you start throwing 98 to 100 and you have a decent slider now, pretty good slider, actually, now you've talked yourself into a high leverage role. I think the walks are the concerning piece, but I've also just said that, well, he'll probably work through that. And it looks like he's made small mechanical tweaks, comparing just early video from this season to last season. I like it. I think the White Sox would benefit from, hey, let's see if we can get him on a fairly friendly deal heading into next year, because I think it'll still be enough where that's the season they have to decide on whether or not they're going to pay Liam Hendriks. Maybe you can get away with not having to pay him $15 million next year, because you have Reynaldo Lopez. I'm trending up on him, but I know people have been hard on him. I have had some people in comments or something say like, "Oh, he's terrible. He's not doing." I think he's been fine. I don't think he's been lights out and locked down by any means, but I think he's been fine.
Yeah, the raw numbers might not look great. I think that's because the biggest issue, kind of like what Jordan already said, is the walk rate is up compared to last year. But overall, I mean, yeah, I like the stuff. He's added some velocity to the fastball. The slider, too, is a little sharper, a little bit of that new school slider, like the one that Dylan Cease throws compared to the more like loopy Kopech type. So I think that, yeah, over time, ideally, he starts throwing strikes more. People have been hard on him. I did see some trying to hang the loss on him the other night when he came into a tough situation and Adley Rutschman hit a double. It's Adley, I'm not going to really fault the reliever there. He missed his spot, yes, but still. So yeah, I'm not ready to say like, oh, pay him, and let him take the Hendricks spot. But kind of what Jordan was saying, I think that in the long run, it's something you can consider if he proves that this early season difficulty finding the zone is an aberration. Because really, even when he was a starter, I mean, obviously he was a lot worse as a starter, but he was never the kind of guy where I'm worried about him just missing his spots wildly. And I'm seeing more of that this season. So I'm wondering if it's just a short-term nerves thing where he's never closed before, he's never been a super high leverage guy, and all of a sudden he is, and it just takes some adjusting.
I think with Reynaldo, Sean, I'll keep it short, and then I'll let you pop in because you were the one who asked the question. But I think with Reynaldo, because I am a fan of Reynaldo Lopez, I always kind of have been. I think his problem, and I think everyone can attest to this, is he does not know how to lay off pitches at all. Like, he is 100% every time he throws the baseball, and I think that really played into him failing as a starter. Is he just didn't know how to like tone it back a little bit over the course of longer outings. I think one of the big problems with him right now is I don't know if, and this is a very underrated point as far as, guys in the bullpen, being fluid. It's not that easy to jump into a closer role and know you're the last pitcher that's going to be out there. I think it might be a little bit of a mental thing with him. And you even see it around baseball, like when the Milwaukee Brewers traded Josh Hader and you have Devin Williams going to that closer role, which he was not used to at all. And Devin Williams, who is now an incredible closer and his stuff has always played, he struggled there for a minute in that closer role. Like, it was an immediate difference in what he was given every single game compared to what he was doing in the setup role. Is that a mental thing? Is that something where, you maybe go about your at-bats a little bit differently? Maybe your pitch selection's different because of this? I don't know. I think that could have something to do with it as well. I don't know exactly how you feel about it, Sean.
Well, his chase rate and his chase percent and swing and miss percent are about on par for 2022 so far. As Nick mentioned, velocity on both his fastball and slider are up. I think people are being real, just judgmental about a team that is losing a lot of games. When Reynaldo Lopez pitches, they are 6-2. I think all of us thought that spot on the 14th was pretty bad for him to be put in against Adley Rutschman after Jake Diekman forced him to come in. And the only other game after that they lost was the let's bring in Jesse Schultens for a pitch, and Hanser Alberto is going to throw it into foul territory. So, outside of a Hanser error and one Jesse Schultens pitch, they're basically 6-1 when Reynaldo Lopez pitches. I think he's been fine at getting the job done. Has it been perfect? No. Has it been clean? No. But Yordan Alvarez hit a home run off him. That happens, and they still win the game. And I think the walk rate, again, it's not his career norm. So I think that will change because, again, he's not getting he's not worse at getting guys to swing and miss and chase outside of the zone, right? Like, I mean, that's on par. So I think that will start to build up. So I'm real excited for Raylo. I don't know about an extension, but I mean, even the Bummer thing, when Bummer's on, I mean, that 16 for 5 looks incredible. So if they're able to get Reynaldo for something like that, yeah, I mean, it'd be a lot easier to stomach Liam leaving if he ever does.
I like the I like the Bummer praise. I'm always a big Bummer guy, so I like a little bit of Bummer praise on here. I'm not going to lie about that.
That sweeper. I was looking at it with the pitch modeling stuff now in Fangraphs with Stuff Plus, and then just run value. It's like him and Ohtani have like the second best sweepers in the league so far. Like when he's on and has that sinker and sweeper, no one hits Aaron Bummer. That's the whole reason they signed him. He's not right. Jake Diekman. He's 100 times better than Jake Diekman. Right.
And I think the one other thing I want to add on Raylo, and I think you both kind of mentioned it, there's the potential transition period to becoming a closer. We all talk about, there's a mental side to it, and I'm not going to disagree. So in that same vein, you almost have to give the guys their chance to rein it in, control things, and then kind of see how they react. Again, 15 games. I keep saying it, but it continues to be something where they're the highs are super high, the lows are super low, and you have to almost wait for them to even out. And I think waiting for him to, I guess, feel like he's solid in the role. He might not have that much time because Liam might be back sooner rather than later, but the more opportunities you can get him in that spot, the better.
Peaks and valleys of White Sox Twitter, I tell you. I don't know if I don't know if that's on a t-shirt yet, but just peaks and valleys of Sox Twitter is something that needs to be on there because I agree with you. It's 15 games. Like we are so up and down with every single one of these things. It always makes for good content, but yeah, it's definitely something we have to deal with. But I know we touched on Andrew Vaughn a little bit earlier, Sean, but I know you're a huge Andrew Vaughn guy. I mean, your cover photo on Twitter always gets me every time I look to your profile. It's always like I'm just staring eye to eye with Andrew Vaughn. It's horrifying and great at the same time. I was at the game yesterday and I saw him hit an absolute wall shot that was just under the catch. If people know what that's referring to, and nobody feels more due for a home run in this lineup. What do you think Andrew needs to do maybe to start getting the power stroke going a little bit more?
Dude, I don't know. He's done a great job at laying off pitches. I thought him going up against Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray, he looked fantastic. Those guys wanted him to bite on sliders outside of the zone, and he said, "Fuck y'all." I don't know if you guys swear on here, but
sure,
you're all good. You're all good.
when it gets to Andrew Vaughn, I get real excited. But I looked up his zone profile stuff on Statcast, and I have been hesitant to give out a ton of stats for the 2023 year so far, just because it's been 15 games. But looking at him versus the slider, you look at the zone, the run value by zone. There are 2 negative zones, and they are in the strike zone, low and away though. It's kind of middle outside, middle away, and then middle, lower middle. But the corner, like actually outside of the zone where it would be a ball, a 1.8 run value. So he's just not attacking that pitch. I think a big thing that he needs to figure out, and I don't think we've seen a ton, but we saw it a lot last year, is taking that low slider the other way. And I think if he figures that out, we always hear that about hitters. If he's able to start doing that, I think he'll figure it out, and the power stroke will start coming. A lot of the stuff that he's been hitting is up the middle. But my frustration is, I mean, he talked about pulling fly balls this entire spring training. you had spring training to start doing this. And Andrew Benintendi and Andrew Vaughn for the first 15 games haven't been doing that. So, whether he's laying off these pitchers or not, he's still not doing what's important. He needs to hit 20 home runs for this team. I mean, there's no way around it. Right now he's at 0. So, I mean, he's just the longer he waits, the longer he's going to struggle. But it seems like he's really selling out for power, and that's causing his swing and miss to go up. And that frustrates me just because he was so dominant last year at not swinging and missing. So, I don't know. I think he's trying to figure out what he is, but I think his approach at the plate has been good, and I think the walk rate around 15% is something Sox fans should take. I think that everything else would come because even too, like the double that you bring up yesterday, it was on an 0-0 count. His current average exit velocity on 0-0 counts is 69.6 miles per hour. That was at 109, so that's a great sign. Like attacking first pitch and he's hitting it 109 off the bat. That's a great sign for Andrew Vaughn. If he keeps doing that, I think the homers will come. We'll see. He's swinging more on 0-0 as well. So, if he's able to try to get that average exit velocity back to his career norm around 90, we'll probably see a lot of positive regression for Andrew Vaughn's power.
Yeah, I think the thing that's mildly frustrating about Vaughn so far is a lot of the time, not yesterday, but a lot of the time his hardest contact this year is going into the ground. Like he hits the ball hard a lot. He'll have a 105 plus regularly, but it'll be with a negative 5-degree launch angle, so he's getting a single or grounding out. So I do mostly agree with Sean. I think that it's just the kind of thing where it'll come over time. I think it was a great point on taking a low and away slider to right field being a potential indicator. I agree with that. It is at the same time, though, I'm not saying Sean was doing this, but in general, I do think people are being too hard on him in the sense that, yes, I'd like to see him hit a home run. Yes, I've seen the stat that the White Sox are one of 2 teams that don't have a home run from a first baseman yet. But A, it's 15 games, and B, you're talking about a guy who has been right around a 400 on-base percentage pretty much the whole season with, a 130 or above weighted runs created plus. Like, he's objectively been very good. It's just a matter of, do you believe he can sustain this patience at the plate without hitting for power? That's the thing where I understand, it becomes harder. But overall, I think that the patience he's showing at the plate, I mean, he's really just not biting on a lot of pitches that he would at least check swing on or swing and miss on in prior seasons. And while it's hard to say that that's sustainable or not, it is an indicator that he's at least growing as a hitter, getting better at recognizing pitches early. And that to me is enough to tell me that if he's recognizing pitches better, then in time he should be better at also attacking pitches. And it's just a matter of can he pull the ball, can he hit it in the air? Because the exit velocities are there, the pitch recognition is there. It just feels like there's one more step to kind of be going from good to great, and I would love to see that happen in the next few weeks.
I think you hit it perfectly. It's you're slowly seeing the development process start, right? It's sliders were a huge issue last year. Now sliders, he seems to be laying off those at a better rate. Chase rate's down. He looks like a more complete version of a hitter. Now it's that next step of pulling fly balls and hitting home runs getting balls in the air so you can hit home runs. It's that next level of development. Again, I do think we all have to keep in mind there's almost a year or two essentially of development that was kind of cut out. The 2020 season as well as any time in double or triple A to kind of really just have that extra development. It might take a little bit longer, so if it takes a couple extra weeks in this year before we start seeing him pull for power, I'm fine waiting a little bit longer. I think that's sort of that next step that I think both Sean, you, and Nick alluded to with that.
Well, and I do think, just to kind of wrap up the point here, I do think playing first base every day, playing in the field, it changes a little bit of what guys do at the plate. I think you could find some career statistics of how guys play in the field compared to how they play it like a DH, which is something that Andrew's played quite a bit of, especially with the Eloy Jimenez injuries over the last few years. So him playing at first base is something that I think he's getting used to as well. He's got the athleticism of Paul Konerko, and I say that in the most endearing way possible. So being able to get fielding in as well as hitting for power, maybe that's something that just takes a little bit of time, So, but anyway, Sean, it has been great having you on the show. I thought this was an incredible conversation. Host of CHGO White Sox and CHGO Bets. That was something I also didn't bring up. You're actually over there with my boy Cody Del Mondo. Unfortunately, he's a Cubs fan, but that's neither here nor there. Sean, it's been great having you on here. Is there anything you want to bring up? You want to plug? Anything exciting coming up here soon?
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, we do post games mostly after every single game. So if you guys are looking for some coverage that's non-NBC Sports Chicago because they've ruined SoxMath and hate me, come over and join Herb, Vinny, and I. But yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was great talking White Sox with you, and hopefully they can start winning some games.
And yeah, speaking of SoxMath, stay off of me. I got to answer for you when you start pulling in these wins. I get in trouble with Joe, where he's like, "Oh, Sean's better than you. Oh, Sean's got something." He's always got something to say when you start winning. So lay off me a little bit, huh?
How many wins have you got this year?
Just one this year.
Okay, so we're neck and neck. I don't know if I'm gonna play anymore because it's just there's no video. I sent in a very clean broadcast-friendly photo of Andrew Vaughn, and they didn't even put it up. So it's like, and you guys have me blocked on Twitter, and White Sox Talk. So it's like, do you guys even want me? I mean, I feel just Jason just kind of, Jason. You could just hear the tone in Jason's DMs that it's just like he doesn't want me sending anything in. So I might have to retire. For SoxMath, I might just have to DM you the answers, Jordan, so you could just see how many times.
We'll play it that way. Let's see how many times then that you beat me in those DMs, because I'm hoping to win once a month. I'm hoping that's what I'm going to go with. But
I mean, are you always like ready for that fourth inning?
Yeah, when I play, it's religious. I've got the computer ready. I've got the phone ready to go. I've got a reputation on the line. That's the problem. I got a whole page that Joe has dedicated to Jordan wins SoxMath on Twitter. I have a lot to behold with this one. So
yeah, I know. Anytime I see the graphic, I just immediately go to Baseball Reference, stat head, and I'm just trying to make sure. If it's a lot of adding or a lot of run differential stuff, I'll just quit from that point. But if it's like career home runs versus total games played, that stuff's the easiest. Give me two little math things to do, and I'll win SoxMath.
That's the problem for me, is when it's like add this and then subtract and multiply. I'm like, oh man, I can't do mental math in my head. It's slowing me down.
Well, and the pitch clock has ruined SoxMath because again they have to just completely get rid of the graphic right away because they have to throw all these pitches in 15 seconds.
I hear you.
Nerds.
I don't see your name.
Yeah, I was going to say
NBC Sports broadcast Duke.
Exactly.
I am awful at math. I'm not a math guy. I'm only a math guy in relative to sports, but
it's sports. It's a sports broadcast. Do you not have a calculator on your phone?
Yeah, it's easy to make fun when you're not winning.
The SoxMath nerds are on me about calculators now. Now I know how you guys are doing it. I'll just have a calculator ready for the fourth inning every single time.
It's easy to make fun when you're not the one winning. It's like a scroll down. See how easy it is? It's just a scroll down.
5 + 5 = 10.
10 + 10 = fuck you, Sean. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Thank you, Sean.
It's been a great interview.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And that was our interview with Sean W. Anderson over at CHGO Sports. Always great talking with that guy, whether you catch him at the ballpark, whether you listen to the podcast over at CHGO White Sox, CHGO Bets, if you are a big betting person as well. He always great content with that guy. He always knows his stuff, gets really into a conversation. Love going back and forth with him with the banter. What are your guys' thoughts on some of the stuff that he said? Jordan, I'll let you go ahead and take it first.
Yeah, first of all, again, Sean, thank you for joining us. It was an awesome back and forth, awesome episode. I think the biggest thing that he kind of stresses, the same thing we're all kind of stressing, like, it's still early. It's hard. The highs are high. The lows are low. I won't complain about one less competitor in SoxMath either, but, take that for what it is. But, Sean, thanks for joining.
Yeah, for sure. It was a great conversation. Thanks to Sean. And I think the one thing for me is we all know as White Sox fans about the resource allocation toward the bullpen, and we hear about it all the time. But hearing him talk about it and what the money could have gone to just really bummed me out a little. I was like, not that I haven't thought about it before, but it just really reinforces all the problems with this team. Kind of many of them kind of stem back to that, and it was just an interesting takeaway for me because I didn't think the conversation was going to go in that direction, but it did.
Yeah, no, I always like that Sean's never afraid to like fire back at something he disagrees with. Me and him don't always necessarily have the same takes, but we usually can discuss it in a way that's just respectful. And I just always get a kick out of talking baseball with him because we do see things a little bit differently, but it always ends up just being a great lighthearted type of convo. So, but anyway, that is all we have for this week's Sox on 35th podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the website at SoxOn35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook and Twitter at SoxOn35th to stay up to date with your Chicago White Sox. This has been Coughlin, joined as always by Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. We will be back next week as we cover another week of White Sox baseball. Thank you and go Sox. This podcast is over.
Go Sox.
Go Sox.